Well, what's up, everybody? Chester RP Church Devotional Podcast. Clint Davis, your host. Thanks so much for joining us. We join together today as we continue in our reading of God's Word. We are in the book of Esther, Esther chapter 2, beginning in verse 19. This was a story, as I said at the very beginning of our study of Esther, that was written during the time of Nehemiah and Ezra. Nehemiah and Ezra focused in on the people of God who had returned to Jerusalem. Esther is a story of triumph, of survival, that focuses in on the people who remained in different parts of the Medo-Persian Empire. So some returned home, some remained where they were. They tried to stay faithful where they were, and they were living where they were. They chose not to return home, and this is a story that is written from their perspective. Esther has been brought into the king's court. She has now replaced Vashti, and as she has replaced Vashti in the king's court, she is one who has been received by the king and made to be the king's new wife, the new queen. Verse 19. Now when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting by the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the chronicles in the presence of the king. Now Mordecai is sitting here by the gate. Esther has yet to tell anybody she's a Jew. That's a theme that's going to run throughout the entirety of the book of Esther. In fact, up to chapter 4, no one knows she's a Jew except for Mordecai. She will make that known later on in the book at a timely manner, at a timely place, at a strategic location in a strategic way to the king to foil the plot of Haman against the king. But right now, no one knows. And Mordecai wisely has said, hey, you need to keep that to yourself. And the reason you need to keep that to yourself is because, right, we are a foreign group of people, and you will not receive the influence and the opportunity that you will receive or that you could receive if they know you're a Jew. This is a very prejudiced, anti-Semitic area and anti-Semitic government. That's what you would expect. They had conquered the Jews. The Medo-Persians, though they appreciated Nehemiah, King Artaxerxes did, who is the same king as King Ahasuerus, and Nehemiah had gone back to build the walls. But certainly you don't want it to be known that you are not being married to a Jew, I should say, is probably a better way to put it. Mordecai understands that they may have appreciated the Jews, but being married to a Jew would be very different. And the queen being a Jew, very different idea than the cupbearer or than other officials being Jewish. And so Mordecai says, you need to keep this to yourself. One day, Mordecai, obviously at the king's gate, listening in for any news about his cousin who became under his charge, whom he had adopted kind of as his own daughter. He was concerned about her being in this position, heard of a plot to kill the king. Two men, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on the king. They were upset. They were angry at the king. And so they sought to lay hands on the king. They sought to harm the king. These were people who the king entrusted with the care of his gate, with the care of those under his charge. Eunuchs were particularly responsible for caring for the harem of the king because they were eunuchs. They were castrated. They were not able to perform, and so there was no issue with reference to them being a concern or a threat to the king. And so these these eunuchs were there, and they sought to bring harm to the king. And Mordecai heard this plot, makes it known to Esther. Esther then tells the king. And as Esther tells the king investigates. And when the king investigates, they find that this plot is true and that these two do indeed intend harm for the king. And as a result of that, they will be punished and they will be removed from their position, and their lives will be taken from them because they sought to harm the king. That's the interesting thing, as we said before, as you read along with us, but if you know the book of Esther at all, there's this idea of an unseen hand of God at work. And this unseen hand of God is working. It worked to bring Esther to a point of prominence in the harem to where she would be the one received by the king. now it's working here to put Mordecai in a position in order to hear this plot, to make it known to Esther, and then Esther to present it to the king, and then the investigation is done. These guys thought they were talking quietly. They thought they were talking to themselves. Maybe they were in their anger, were being a little louder than they needed to be. I don't know if that happens to you. Sometimes that happens to me. I get angry, get frustrated. I'm confiding in someone, but I might be too loud. And as a result of that, other people may hear what I'm saying, and that's not a good thing. And maybe that's what happened here. But whatever the case is, these two men told their plot to harm the king. Mordecai heard it because God had put him in a position to hear it. Mordecai, doing the right thing, came to Esther and said, hey, listen, your husband is about to be killed by these people. So he's reporting what he had heard to her. She reports it to the king. The investigation's done. So we see God at work. We see Mordecai's hands at work. We see God's hands at work. We see Mordecai's wisdom at work. And we recognize that he is doing the right thing, and we are called to do the right thing as well to ensure that truth and life is protected at all times. You guys take care. God bless you. We'll catch up with you next time.